I want you to imagine that in the tree right outside of this house, which is a very little lovely holly tree, there is a giant snake, size that must have been the snake that Eve looked at in the Garden of Eden. And I come up to you, and you're the gardener for that tree. You've been tending it all your life. 30, 40 years you've been tending that tree, and you've never seen a snake in it. And I run up to you and say, look, there's a snake in that tree over there. Now the first thing that runs into your mind is this fellow's crazy. But I'm sort of persistent, and I say to you, now please, I want you to get rid of that snake in that tree. It should be clear to you that you couldn't get rid of that snake in that tree. And so, if you were to try to, you would spend many fruitless hours. What you do know is that I, coming to you with a story about a snake in that tree, I am hypnotized. And you know that the only way to make me realize there's no snake in the tree is to awaken me. On the other hand, if you were to take my word for it and then proceed to try to remove the snake from that tree, you too would be hypnotized. And both of us would now be in the same boat. Now, when you look out on this world and when you see evil, you are not aware of the hypnosis for one reason. The fellow next to you sees it too. And the fellow next to him sees it as well. And so you have no method for determining that you are hypnotized. Neither have I any method for determining that you are hypnotized, because I see the evil that you see. And every man, woman, and child on the earth sees the same evil, and therefore none of them could come to the conclusion that the other fellow is hypnotized. Only one could know this. He would have to be in a consciousness, as Jesus was, to look at mankind and say, why, the poor fellows are hypnotized. They're all seeing snakes in a little holly tree, and there isn't any. And this is by way of preface to the snake in the Garden of Eden. This should have been to mankind the clue that they were not in the creation of God. This should have been the clue to mankind that every evil, every snake, is but the hypnosis of the human mind. And both Adam and Eve, under this hypnosis, seeing what didn't exist, constitute the hypnotic state of the human race. Now, in the first chapter of Genesis, which we want to dwell on a little more today, we have a perfect spiritual kingdom. It's as if you sat down to design a building, and you design all of it to your complete satisfaction, and you have this perfect blueprint of all of the levels, how they're going to be integrated, how they're going to serve each other, the materials, even an estimate of the amount of time it will take to build it, the cost. Everything is finished, but nothing has been built. It's simply a completed idea. Now, in God's kingdom, the completed idea is the first chapter of Genesis. The complete, total spiritual kingdom. It even goes a step further. The 6 days represent the appearance in sequence, in spiritual manifestation of the basic absolute idea. First the absolute idea, then in various periods each idea comes forward into manifestation for you and I to understand it. Each is moving simultaneously from its position into the next position, so that there is a spontaneous manifestation of the one idea in a period called 6 days. Now, of course, the 6 days representing no particular time, you must see why. And this will end that debate. When God created his idea, there was not yet any day. There was no such thing as a day. There was no such thing as a sun or an earth revolving around a sun. And this little earth revolving around sun, this pygmy in God's creation, which we measure days by, had not yet been created, so there was no such thing to measure day by. And this is merely for the purposes of elucidation, to make it somewhat comprehensible for the human mind. Now, God created in the beginning, and that beginning doesn't mean in the beginning of time. It means the origin. In the origin, the genesis of all things, before there was a world, before there was time, there was a plan, a divine plan in a divine mind, called heaven and earth. And this heaven and this earth represent the high and the low, represent what even comes down eventually to being male and female, heaven being male and earth being female, ever seeking to find one another, each seeking the other, heaven to impregnate earth with the idea of the divine, and earth to find heaven, to find the idea of the divine, ever seeking oneness. And this heaven and earth are not the heaven and earth that we know. This heaven and earth spoken there is not this earth, and it is not this heaven. This is the plan behind the various manifestations in spirit and finally in the physical. This is the unchanging earth, the unchanging heaven. Not this earth spinning around a sun. This is the spiritual earth, even before it became a spiritual earth. You're going to see what I mean in a moment. Now this heaven, this earth, or the positive, negative, the male, female, the high, the low, the one, complete, absolute, perfect, and from them in 6 days evolves that divine heaven and earth which has been ideated in the mind of God. Now you will notice that God created the heaven and the earth. And that is a very strange word, because created doesn't mean that he made heaven and earth. Created means something else than made. Made means something different than created. And that I would like you to see. In a sense, let's put it this way. You turn out a lamp and you create darkness. Now you didn't make that darkness. You turned out the lamp and thus created darkness. It is in the sense that creation is used in the word created. There is a car on a hill and a brick is holding it. You do not touch the car, you remove the brick. Now, did you move the car? No, but because you removed the brick, you caused the motion of the car. This too is the implication in creation. There is a wood resting or a beam resting on a pillar, and you remove the pillar and the beam falls down. Did you move the beam, or did you move the pillar? And so we're going to see a distinction between made and create. To make is to make something specific which is forever. To create conveys a different significance that is only visible or apprehensible as you become acquainted with the unfoldment of the 6 days. Now, on the first day, we have a very unusual thing. We have the Spirit of God, we have the earth, we have the darkness, we have another. And I want you to see one puzzling thing there, that he is speaking about the spiritual creation of the 4 elements, and darkness represents fire. He's speaking in the Spirit of God, he's speaking of the air. In the darkness, he's speaking of the fire. And the earth that he's speaking of is now not the earth that we know of, but earth that he speaks of in creating heaven and earth means everything in the above, and that earth in heaven and earth represents the 4 elements. This is the earth which is a category comprising the 4 elements, one of which is also the earth. You're going to find another earth later. This earth is the spiritual idea of 4 elements, which later fused together make possible the various individual living creatures in the creation. And so this earth is everything below the heaven. Heaven and that below it is called the earth, and it isn't referring to this earth, the mother earth, the female earth, but rather is a more comprehensive term including the 4 elements of fire, air, water, and earth. And he mentions them right there in the first day to clarify what he's speaking of. And it was necessary for this idea to be first so that the later ideas of life as we know it could be germinated in these 4 elements. Now, as you watch carefully, you're going to see spheres set in motion, and then you're going to see a great panorama in which all of the spheres, sort of like giant egg beaters, moving through the 4 elements with the light shining and darkness as well in a sort of psychedelic light pattern. These egg beaters, or motions of spheres through the 4 elements, create all of the combinations in an infinite variety which eventually terminate as the ideas which produce life in the air, on the land, and on the sea. Now, from the invisible idea comes an invisible manifestation which never reaches the human eye. In this invisible manifestation, we have the 6 days. These 6 days are the bringing forth into spiritual manifestation the one spiritual idea of heaven and earth. And always you will discover that in the manifestation something happens which in the visible later will eventuate as things trying to come together, trying to return to a state of oneness from which they have departed. And so you'll see in all life there is this coming together of the male and the female, for it all starts with the oneness of heaven and earth, then branching out into 4 elements, and we're still in the realm of spiritual manifestation, not in physical manifestation. Now we're going to have to go to it to detail it a little more finely. The earth was without form and void, I want to introduce an idea right here that there is an Aramaic and a Hebraic scripture which is somewhat different than this. Without form in the Aramaic and void in the Aramaic is translated to be, without form is translated as mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. The earth was mourning. And void is translated crying. And the reason for this is that the Aramaic is translated from the original Aramaic. The words are toha and boha. And these are the meanings of them: crying, mourning. Now, this introduces an idea which has been veiled from the world. And the idea becomes very clear as you begin to probe deeper here. You will see the implication of earth as having life of itself. A life irrespective of your life and my life, but a life in which there is an essence which can mourn and which can cry. And this is a literal meaning which does not bear interpretation. It means what it says. It means that the earth was mourning and crying, and it is telling us that this earth, which was void and without form, was so for a reason. And this develops as you come forth into certain passages here, and you find the idea of a sensitivity, a life being built up, a life that is present outside of earth, a life that is omnipresent outside of earth, a life outside of earth, a life that is in the stars, is in all of the objects that we see outside of earth. A very upsetting and yet a very welcome idea as you begin to warm up to it. And you will find it developed here very carefully to show us that earth, at the moment of this creation, being void and barren, formless, was something that happened because of a divine idea. That in this formless void, something was actually taking place called a darkness. A darkness was there. And now God is going to separate the light from the darkness. And this is the same relationship as creating, described a moment ago. When you bring up a light, you create a darkness. There's only the darkness without light, and you're not creating it. You're not aware of it. But the moment you bring up a light, darkness becomes a fact that wasn't known before. All of the things that are called creation, then, are not something that is made, but something that happens because something else is done. You bring up a light, and this makes a darkness. Now you have the light and the darkness. You will find then, whenever creation is used biblically, it is not something that is exactly made directly, but something that is formed through something else being done. And what else is being done is the mystery that we must uncover, because that mystery is pointed up in a very unique way in the second day. You will discover the second day is the only day in which God does not look and say it was very good. And there is a reason, and that reason is the mystery of mysteries. why the second day was not pronounced very good, whereas every other day was. And perhaps we can discover it. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. The deep being all that was below heaven. There was darkness. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now we have here the darkness, the Spirit of God, the air, the darkness, the fire, and the earth. And these are the elements now in formation. And God says, let there be light. And there was light. Now who did God say that to? Was there anyone he could talk to? We are seeing here a spontaneous divine mind idea expressed in terminology that is perhaps very graphic, but was seeing a thought, a divine thought, personalized by saying, God said, let there be light. And there was light. Now this light wasn't the sun. This was the fact of light itself, that there is light. The sun was yet to come. Now, is this the light Jesus spoke of when he said, I am the light? Is this the light Jesus spoke of when he said, ye are the light of the world? Would this light then be a life itself, without which there is no life? Is this the light which we are waiting to be illumined by? Is this the light that we seek when we talk of enlightenment? God said, let there be light. Now this light pulsed through the Spirit of God. What is the difference between spirit and light? Can we see that light is the vehicle which forms the invisible patterns of God's thought, and as that thought touches the Spirit of God, they intertwine in a pattern of that thought. Spirit becomes the animated thought, and that animated thought in spirit becomes light. And so we have a universe invisible of spirit animated by thought, which becomes a pattern, a continuous, unseparated, infinite pattern of divine thought expressed as light in pattern light waves, but invisible, infinite, without separation, and this is the perfect invisible creation. This is heaven and earth now transferred into a pattern of light. And it is the distortion of this light which eventually causes the appearance of a snake, or of an evil, or of a tidal wave. Now we have the pattern of light behind the visible universe. And this pattern is first light itself, unimpregnated with thought, ready now to receive the heaven and earth creation into itself, so that the life becomes heaven and earth itself in pattern. And now each day these patterns are formed as heaven and earth in God's mind is impressed upon the light. First the light, and then the things that will follow. God saw the light and that it was good. Now good means, yes, this is my divine idea perfectly transformed into light. That's the meaning of good. The light is exactly what I want. The light will do the job The light is perfect. Everything so far is exactly as it should be. And you cannot remove one whit of it and maintain that absolute perfection, as man later will try to do. This is good. This will fit. Now the first invisible story of that blueprint is finished. We're going to the second floor. How many days did it take? It didn't take a second. There was no time yet. This was in eternity. And this is the eternal plan slowly unfolding itself to a spiritual consciousness which Moses obviously communed with and was able to receive his enlightenment. Now we're in the first day. God is now dividing light from darkness. Now this light and this darkness are a problem because in God there was no darkness at all. And so you see, until we knew that this was the invisible word for fire, this darkness, we now have light and fire. One is transparent and one is not. One is capable, one is the highest form of activity above the earth, above the waters, above the air, and there's the fire, the eternal fire in the heavens, from which all things must spring, which being fused with the air, fused with the water above the earth, and fused with the earth becomes a manifestation which later can appear as this world. Now, as we rest in the eternal silence of the Father, all of this is happening at one moment. The actual creation is a simultaneous creation. It isn't divided into periods of time, but it comes forth into manifestation at different periods in the invisible. And now we're watching that the light and darkness is going to come forth, and the air and the fire is going to come forth in new combinations, making the second delineation possible. You're watching on an infinite level, you're watching vapor become water, become ice. You're watching vapor evaporate or condense into water. You're watching water solidify into ice. But you're watching it on an infinite level. And now it's the four elements which precede the water. And then the water will become solidified into the ice. And this is the spiritual evolvement of consciousness unfolding. As each degree is transformed into the next degree, just as you in your own mind would transform one idea into another, each would pyramid into another idea, evolving into a final manifestation. And here these ideas are being wedded one to the other, each dependent on the one before it, as from the spirit you come into the spiritual manifestation. Without the fifth step, the fourth, the sixth wouldn't be possible. Without the fourth, the third wouldn't be possible. And they come in the sequence because each sequence makes the next possible. Before God can say, now it's completed, perfect, nothing to be added, nothing to be subtracted, it's all good, it's finished, it's right. And then the perfect creation stands there waiting now in perfect spiritual manifestation for you and I to open our consciousness and to admit it into our human mind, which has blotted it out unknown to itself. Now, as we completely understand these various degrees, we will come to a point where we can see a moment, not in time and not in eternity, but a moment which we're coming to now, which will answer a question somebody asked me. When did we get off the beam? And this is in the second day, when God doesn't say it's good. Now, the firmament here, there are 3 firmaments, I believe, in this first creation. There are 2 earths. There are all kinds of water, and there are 2 heavens. And so they have to be clarified. Now, here, this firmament that is going to come between the waters, divide the waters. The firmament is the unexplained mystery. You'll discover that this firmament is going to be spiritually that gap between eternity and time. And the reason it isn't spoken of as good is this: only when something is finished does God call it good. Not when it's still in a process of evolving. When God pronounces something good, it is permanent, it is completed, it is established, it is a foreverness. Now, the manifestation of the second day was not a completion. And it will not be a completion until you and I make it so. Until you and I learn about the water above the earth and learn how to live there in consciousness. Then that manifestation will be complete. Then it will be good. This is the one area where we must dwell in consciousness in order to find in ourselves a meaning that cannot be given to us by any person on earth. This is the area where we make an admission to ourselves of something that few have been able to make, and that is that this earth that we stand on is not God's creation. This earth that we walk on and live in is not God's creation. That's the meaning signified by it was mourning, it was crying. Now, God made heaven and earth. But not this earth. And your clue to that is that on this earth there is an evil serpent appearing in the Garden of Eden on this earth. And so we're not on God's earth. Omnipotence doesn't permit evil on God's earth. We're on the earth created in the mind of man. But there is an earth which God created, an invisible earth, a spiritual earth, and our coming into the realization of that spiritual earth is the reason it was not able to be said that it was good on the second day. This firmament that divides the waters brings the waters that become the low, the earth, below this firmament, and the waters that become the true earth are above this firmament. And the true earth above the firmament are the waters, and the false earth below the firmament eventuates as this earth. Now, the difference is strictly one of consciousness. We live and move and have our being in the earth that mourns and cries, which was formless and void because it is not the embodiment of God's spiritual idea. Now, I will set this clock at, let's say, 4 o'clock right now. It's 4 o'clock. Now, I can look at this time any time I wish, but it'll never tell me the correct time anymore until I fix those hands. Now, that's the situation with the human mind. Whenever you look through it, it's like looking at the clock in which the hands have been set incorrectly. You will always see what that mind sees, but the hands of that mind are not set on the right time. And so as you look out of it, you're going to see things that aren't there. I will see 4 o'clock, but it isn't 4 o'clock. And in an hour I'm going to see 5 o'clock, and it won't be 5 o'clock, but I'll see it. And you're going to look out of a human mind and see snakes, as Eve did. You're going to look out of a human mind and see all kinds of things and say, I see them, without knowing that the dials of your mind are set incorrectly. And so as long as you're looking through it, you will be looking at that which is not true. You will be looking and saying, there's evil, there's an earthquake, there's a headache, there's a cold, there's a problem. And nothing in the world will convince you that the dials of your mind are telling you the incorrect time. And yet the Christ mind is set at the right time. Now the Christ mind lives in the waters above the firmament as well as below. The human mind lives in the waters below the firmament. Now that isn't all there is to it. You may discover when you enter the soul realm that there is an inversion between the soul and the mind. The soul looks out one way, the mind looks the opposite way. Cannot see what is in the soul, and the soul cannot bring to it the divine idea. Now this firmament is the separation between soul and mind, which finally comes out as an illegitimate human race, disconnected in thought from its parent. Earth disconnected from heaven, and yet never really separate, but thinking so. Earth and heaven are always one in spirit, but in the visible you see the earth and seek the heaven. Now, there are passages in here which have never been brought to your attention in any of the teachings that I know, in which certain things come alive that have never been noticed. And unless you have come to a place in consciousness where you can say, the earth that I live in is a human mind creation, completely blocked off from that which is, these statements to follow will be meaningless to you. But if you have reached a glimpse of that yourself, you will see down here, when God makes the two great lights, the greater to rule the day and the lesser to rule the night, that the reason we have passed over this is because we have not understood the totality of its meaning. You see, first he puts the lights in the firmament of heaven to give light. Now, these lights that are giving light to earth, that's one thing. But now he adds the thought, which we have slurred over, God made two great lights, the greater to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. The word rule is used with intent. It means to rule. It means precisely that. And now you're seeing that life is existent in that which we call the sun and that which we call the moon. We are giving them names, but they are not the sun and the moon. They are spiritual life. And it is said that they are to rule the earth, and it means to rule the earth. In other words, there is life there that you are not aware of. These words have too often been taken to mean some kind of imaginative way of speaking, but they don't mean that at all. They mean precisely that there is life to rule the earth. And so you're beginning to understand that there is a world in which angels do live. Now, we on earth, as human beings, have begun to think of ourselves as the end product of God's greatest creation. But we have only presumed that we are the man that God created. And we aren't. We are not the end product of God's creation. We are a false mental idea learning that the reality of us is the end product of God's creation. But that this is not the reality of us. Now these things, these lights that are to rule the earth, they are ruling the earth at this moment. And now you become aware that life has no blank spaces. There is no absence of life anywhere. Life is a total, infinite, inseparable thing. And that the inhabitant of all of this life is God itself, and is the one inhabitant. And so man has to come out of a little mental shell of vanity and conceit and begin to open up to invisible, omnipresent life, which is ever reaching him, probing him, educating him, lifting him, trying to bring him out of a wilderness, a mourning and a crying earth, where duality is prevalent, where the opposites of truth are flitting all over, and where man, the false, the imitation image of man, with a capital M, is besieged by these opposites, at a loss to explain them, ever running from one shadow to the next, saying, how can I, the image and likeness of God, be so besieged? Never realizing that he is not the image and likeness of God, and that he is to be ruled by a power far greater than his limited mental self. And that as he finds this power and lets it lift him into its rhythm, the serpents on the tree, the earthquakes, the diseases, the various levels of human consciousness which do not know God will be opened up. And then we will get a glimpse of that man which we are, that divine image and likeness. Now, this is by way of prelude, I think, to say that we each are the center of a world. I'm the center of a world. You're the center of a world. Every individual is the center of his world. We are all worlds within worlds. But there is one divine seed, invisible to us all, but implanted in us all. And it is only the attainment of the awareness of that divine seed in you that lifts you from the man who walks in the shadows of evil unable to comprehend them or to defend against them. And that man with his human mind can never overcome these evils. That man is always pronouncing a snake in the tree and always trying to do something about it, because he is looking at a tree that isn't there and seeing a snake in it. The tree itself isn't there. The material world isn't there. And as long as you look what isn't there, whatever you see in it isn't there. And this is the nature of the total hypnosis which is described in the second and third chapters of Genesis. Before that hypnosis, we're given the perfect ideation and the perfect manifestation of it invisibly. And then suddenly, like a movie director, Moses behind the scene says, cut from this scene, come over to that one. Now we'll get a close-up. Let's go down to that earth, which was manifested invisibly in spirit, and now let's get a close-up. And let's show right there how foolishly something in man has translated the perfection of what is into the imperfection of what is not. Now, I think this might be a good pause. Let's get a glass of water, and then we'll go back to our perfect creation, which can never leave us, is ever present. There is a passage here in the 19th Psalm which you have heard many times. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Now, in light of what we have said, I'd like you to see this in a new way. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. These terms are never used about that which does not have life. These terms are speaking about the essence of those heavens which are uttering the praise of God and shouting forth his handiwork. The life, the essence of those heavens is literally speaking. This is not a description for little man on earth so that he can look up and say, oh yes, God made those things. No. This is to awaken you and I to the fact that this is really happening. The heavens are right this moment declaring the praise of God to God. And this has nothing to do with you and I. This is the living heavens. And the firmament is showing his handiwork and uttering by speech. And these terms are used to tell you of life all around you, everywhere. That which is a star is alive, but it isn't a star. It is life invisible appearing to you as a star. And that invisible life is declaring to God praise for the essence within itself. You are in the middle of eternal life. It surrounds you. It beats everywhere. It can never be extinguished. And you are part of it. And we must become aware of the invisible life all around us. In this psalm, David caught that, just as in the 17th or 18th verse there of Genesis, the first chapter, we are told that these lights are to rule, and they are. The life in them is the life that is also your life. There will come one day a consciousness expanded to appreciate the fact that they're speaking about my life, which is not confined to this form. that there is an infinite life pulsing through the universe, which is your life. And you're not a segment of it or a fraction of it. And this body bears false witness to the truth of our being. Now Isaiah was trying to awaken us to some of this. And here's what he said. I'm going to the 11th chapter of Isaiah. I'm going to read from the 6th to the 9th verse of the 11th chapter. Now this, when illumination comes, is what happens. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. That which you see on earth as the wolf and the lamb are invisibly the one life, seen through the distortion of human sense. And the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and the little child shall lead them. Now who's that little child? The Spirit of God in you shall show you the invisible kingdom that your human eyes cannot see. That little child is the child of the Christ within yourself. The little child shall lead them. The little child in you shall show you harmony where the eye sees discord. The little child in you shall show you peace where the eye sees war. The little child in you shall show you the paradise where the human eye sees a snake. Now, the cow and the bear shall feed, the young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters covers the sea. Now, in my holy mountain, the little child that shall lead them in the holy mountain are one and the same. And we're going to the 5th Psalm, the 4th Psalm, because we want to see what this holy mountain is, which will make us see all things in their proper relationship instead of the enmity which seems to be prevalent on the face of the earth. This holy mountain, this child that shall lead them, is always the same. It's a stone carved out of the mountain without hands. And watch it. Look how simple it says it. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. Now what does that mean? Put your trust in the Lord. You're being told that you are walking in a material universe in which you are seeing the opposites that do not exist in reality. And as you walk in this material universe, seeing the opposites, you are really walking in the 1st chapter of Genesis, where there are no opposites. You're walking in a perfect and immaculate spiritual creation. And you are seeing an imperfect, unimmaculate, material creation. And the child, the holy mountain, the trust, is your ability to stop looking at the watch where the hands are set wrong. And that watch where the hands are set wrong is your human mind. And you must cultivate that habit of standing between the material universe of untruth and the spiritual, ever-present universe of truth, and see that they both cannot exist. Only one can exist. And now you are to stand in that corridor of silence in the middle of the two universes, the one that is and the one that isn't, and place your trust in that which you cannot see, and thus make your transition from those 2 chapters of Genesis where snakes appear to the creation where illumination shows no snake is possible. On the 7th day he rested because his creation was good. And good to God means something that no man has comprehended. To God, good means what man would say if he had invented the perfect infinite computer, something so flawless that it would be a total impossibility for error ever to occur. He would use great adjectives: fabulous, unbelievable, beyond all belief, incredible. And God simply says, good. And that good means eternal perfection. Not a single part missing. One welded whole. One complete image and likeness in the mind of God, comprising all that is, and all of it being under the law of that God. So now you have the 3 principles of omnipresence which mean good. Good means I am omnipresent in my creation. There is no part of the spiritual creation that is not God. And my power is omnipresent in my creation. There is no part of the spiritual creation in which the power of God is not fulfilling the law of love. Love invisibly is fulfilling the law everywhere. It isn't that love is the fulfilling of the law. Love is fulfilling it now. Throughout the creation of the Father, love is fulfilling that creation. And there's nothing on earth or in heaven that can stop it. This is a perpetual, eternal dispensation. No power can stop love from fulfilling itself as the law of the creation. And the all-knowing mind, which embraces its own creation, knows everything happening in its creation, and so you have a perpetual law of perfection. And now this creation is finished, and God is in the 7th day, and so are you. This is the 7th day. We stand in a 7th day that will never be anything but the 7th day. So the 7th day is eternity. The creation finished. Your reality stands in eternity in the 7th day, surrounded by the goodness which is invisibly manifest in the creation, and this goodness is the omnipresence of God, the omnipower of God, and the omnimind of God. And in it, there is no possibility of error. There is no possibility of evil. Now that is the only creation there is, and that is the only creation you can ever live in. You can assume a creation. You can imagine a creation. You can suppose a creation. But there is no power on earth that can create another creation. And therefore, the creation is omnipresent. The perfection is omnipresent. The life is omnipresent. And where you stand at this moment is the little child, awake in you, awake and knowing it is in the perfect creation. And only that little child awake in you now knows of the creation in which it stands. And that which appears as the external you, unaware of this invisible child within you, it alone walks in a supposed and imagined and uncreated creation called this world. Now, while you're walking in this world, the little child within you is walking in the kingdom. And there's no point in trying to fix up this world, because it isn't here to fix up. There's no point in trying to remove the snakes from that holly tree behind you, because there's no snake in it. And as long as you're trying to fix up your human life, your world, you're trying to fix up a world that has no existence. You're going to continue finding the impossibility of it until you are removed from the scene. Because there is no provision for the eternal era of human life. The goodness inherent in the 6 days of manifestation are the invisible will of God. There is no power to stand up to that will and say you can't come any further. The will of God is expressing, and it is the Father's will that you be perfect, as the creation is perfect. And therefore, any attempt on your part to perpetuate a material existence in any way is a disobedience of the divine will. Any attempt to perpetuate a happier life, a good life, a better human life, is a complete disavowal of the injunction to be perfect, because there is no such thing as a perfect human being. And that's proven when the breath is taken out and the limbs are still. There goes that so-called perfection. Now, perfection is spiritual perfection, for there is no other. And to be perfect as your Father which is in heaven involves a complete realization that I am living in a world which does not exist, and that the human existence and every aspect of it is a falsification of the divine idea. My function isn't to improve that which is inherently false. My function is to awaken to the little child within me, who alone has the single eye of the Father. My function is to find the holy mountain which is carved within me, which is a holy silence of my human being, which is really non-being. And in finding this child within, this holy silence, this Christ, before me is lifted the veil of matter. Before me is lifted the mountain of human thought. Before me is lifted all that is called the mist, which makes possible the false appearance of uncreation, non-creation, in which I have lived these many human uncreated lives seeking that which is creation. Now, there is a complete mental universe on this side of the mist, totally. And in that mental universe appears that which is called our human life. Its resemblance to the spiritual creation is like a grain of sand to an infinite beach. It is a little dot of thought parading as a world, and in it all that exists is the fabric of a non-created mind. all the thought in that world is the fabric of a mind not created, not existent. And that non-created mind is the expression of the firmament which separated the waters in the second day. That firmament, that expansion, that vault, separating the waters of truth from those of untruth, the high from the low, the light from the dark, finally show forth as that which we on earth cannot relate. We cannot find that point where creation stopped being creation and the human scene began. And that's because of the expanse between the waters above and below. The child lives in the waters above and below. Man lives below, but the true inner man lives above and below. And only the child knows the way. The birth of the babe is very important because it is that child come into the human consciousness which knows the way from the lower waters to the higher and takes you out of that separation which the firmament in the second day appears to be in the outer external world. That separation manifest in the physical is the mystery. And you can trace it first to your human mind and then to the mist of world belief, of world thought. And that world thought is the gap between the two waters. That is a non-existent gap, completely imagined. There is no gap. There is no firmament between the two waters. Everything you see in the 6 days of creation are connected, one to the other. They are simply different levels of spiritual creation, each evolving from the next. There is no separation from any part of God to another part of God. And now, as you find the child within yourself, this will be your fourth dimensional consciousness, taking you out of all of the questions and all of the gaps and all of the doubts and all of the incomprehension. For no three-dimensional mind can comprehend the invisible Spirit of the Father. And I can answer your questions and you may be satisfied. But they still are not the child within you. And that child within you is the gap that fills what you call the gap. Only when you find that child do you find the oneness with the creation which establishes you in your identity. Now, as long as you're looking out of this human mind, you're going to be in the wrong universe. You'll never be in the right universe looking out of the wrong mind. Now you must lay down your concepts because the spiritual creation is not attainable through your concepts. You look out of certain window panes and what you see is this world. But when you look out of the eyes of that child within you, you will see this creation in which the child lives. And then that child will grow. Then it will mature. Then it will show you you are not confined to a physical form. Then it will show you how to walk in the spiritual universe and how to take dominion. How all of you encompasses all of the 6 days of creation. You're not confined to any one day or any one province. This is your creation, and the little child in you shall lead you. That little child, then, is the spark of divinity that you ignite by putting your trust in the God which is the substance of the total creation. And when you find the little child within you, you have found yourself, because you are that child, which is the child of God. Now there's no sense looking out with your eyes anymore and trying to fight the snakes on the tree, or the epidemics and earthquakes and disasters of this world and all the lacks and limitations of it. That's the activity of a hypnotized mind. And as long as you're going to fight these things, the cosmic hypnosis that maintains you in a level which is not creation can never be broken, and you are perpetuating a world of appearances that has no reality. Now, when you come to me and tell me there are snakes in the tree, my job is to see that I awaken you from your hypnosis, not that I go out there on that tree and start sawing the limbs off to remove the snakes. And so your consciousness must come to the point where, in order to find the child, you first rise to a level that can accept the truth that you can never remove an evil from this world. You can never remove an evil from this world. If you can be convinced of that, you will reach another consciousness which says there's no evil to remove, there's no snake on the tree. This is the only creation. And if I were to try to remove an evil, I would be saying that God is not omnipotent. God is not present. God is unknowing. Because God would have to be impotent, not knowing, and not present for an evil to exist in the creation of God. Where is the evil? If it cannot exist in the creation of God, where is it? It must be in the hypnotized mind. And so there's no sense going out there to get rid of the evil. Get rid of the hypnotized mind. Now that's your first step then. If you're willing to try to get rid of the hypnotized mind and not of the evil, you are a million leagues ahead of this world, which is still trying to get rid of the evils and to sew them up. You are realizing the hypnotized mind is the separation between that which I experience in this world and the perfect creation. Now to remove that hypnotized mind is to reveal to me the sixth-day creation, where I can walk and live and have my being. And so the first step is to refuse, to reject, to totally refuse to have anything to do with the evils of this world, not to improve them or to remove them. Don't get out on a limb and start sawing the snakes away. They cannot exist, and the evils cannot exist, and that must be a level of consciousness attained before you can find that child within you. You must live at that level which does not deny the omnipresence of God's perfect creation. You are honoring God supremely in all thy ways. And so you're at the level now where you refuse to honor this world. First the evils and then the good. Because the good of this world is transient. It is not the creation of the Father. It is alive and then it is dead. It is well and then it is sick. Now you're looking at the opposites and seeing that neither pair of the opposites exist, neither the positive or the negative, the good or the bad. You're looking at the material world and you're rising above it. You're rising first to the consciousness which does not grapple with your adversary and turns the other cheek. And now you're rising above the material world. It is but the appearance seen through a hypnotized mind. Now what in you is beginning to see this? That in you which begins to see this is the birth of the child. As you can live at that level that rejects the good and the bad, first the evil and then the good, and finally all material creation as not of your Father, you are rejecting the imitation, the mental, the recreation. And you live in this consciousness until the babe is born, the child leads you, you are illuminated from this new mind, this Christ consciousness, and there stands your creation. And all of it is you. I and the Father are one creation, one substance, one being. God becomes the only inhabitant of God's creation, and this is your consciousness. All is good. Who are we to stand here and say there's evil? Who are we to accuse the Father of lying? Why are we such fools as to accept the possibility that God could create that which is imperfect, when now we know we can stand still in the face of it and say God is the only creator, the only creation, and therefore this must be an outpicturing of a hypnotized mind? That's laying down your life. Once you accept the hypnotized mind as the false tempter to make us see a false creation, when you can lay down this false mind and rest in the total trust that the mind of God is your habitation, and that you stand now revealed as the living creation of God, then you have walked out of the Adam and Eve creation, and you are reborn of the Spirit, and you are walking now in a world of God's creation where any appearance of a snake is impossible. That should be your present attitude. Any appearance of an evil is impossible, and therefore I shall not grapple with the impossible. I shall not resist the impossible. It has no relation to me because I am and it is not. Now this consciousness ultimately is the freedom which makes the creation of God your living world. Now, is not God present at this moment? And therefore, if God is present and there is something wrong in your life, can that wrong be true? Could there be a wrong in the presence of Him whom to know aright is life eternal? Is not the wrong your statement that God is not present? Isn't the wrong a statement that the absence of God, the lack of God's power, and the lack of God's intelligence has made this possible? Every wrong in your life is such a statement. Every wrong in your life is a statement that you are not in the creation of God, that you are not under the power of God, or the intelligence of God, or the law of God. And so you perpetuate an untruth, and you perpetuate the appearance of that untruth. The final realization of omnipresence must fully free you from every false appearance. And the false appearance, most of all, that it must free you from is your own mind, which is the beast which walks hand in glove with the father of lies. We must be freed from the mind that looks out because that mind looking out will always give us a false picture of creation. Forget the creation out there. Work on this mind and release yourself from it 24 hours a day. Stand back of it. Pause. Speak to the divine mind and ask it to come forth and interpret the scene to you. Rest. This is the seventh day. Live in it. Live consciously that you are in the seventh day, and it will manifest as the mind of the Christ. And you will look out through window panes that see creation and not miscreation. Now, a man said to me the other day, I work in a place where it's almost impossible to do that. And by the end of the day, well, at about the first or second hour, I'm holding up one brick, and then another brick, and then another on it, and another. He says, by the end of the day, he says, I've really held up all the bricks of that building. I've held them up. He says, but I'm awfully tired. He says, what can I do about it? You've got to realize there are no bricks there. You've got to realize that you're in the perfect creation, and what has happened really is this. You have let others who are hypnotized make you believe that you must do something about their hypnosis. Whereas you don't have to do something about their hypnosis. You're merely letting the man come up to you and say there's a snake in the tree, and you're saying, by gosh, there is, and you're running with him to do something about it. Now, when he comes up to you hypnotized, that doesn't mean you must be. And so that is where it must stop. When the world comes to you with its hypnosis, you don't say yes. You must stop that hypnosis. It must hit a consciousness of the little child, which knows no evil. You must be that consciousness, and you'll find you don't have to go through a day from one problem to the next, from one crisis to the next. These are hypnotized crises by a hypnotized individual who has accepted a hypnotized material life, who has heard enough by now about the truth of being and who stubbornly clings to a mind which is incapable of presenting the true creation. Now then, suppose you just made a very simple test. Suppose when this hypnosis of evil or pressure or the world is heavy upon you, makes its entrance into your mind, suppose you do something about it. Suppose you just stand there with a pause which is saying, Father, here comes that pressure, help me. I'm suspending the operation of this surface mind, and I'm waiting for that infinite mind to take over. Just pause that minute and see if it doesn't. When someone yells, here's a snake, you pause and see if that mind within and without doesn't say, as you pause, there's no snake there. This fellow is hypnotized. He thinks he's got a deadline. He thinks he's under pressure. He thinks this must be done this minute. He thinks this is due, that's overdue. Pause. This is my universe. He isn't God, I am. Pause. Let me reset the patterns for you. Pause. Don't rush. Pause. It's the seventh day. Rest. And watch me put every little brick for you in its proper place. Watch the divine mind come to you the moment you acknowledge its presence. Instead of rushing pell-mell in response to every pressure and resisting every evil and grappling with every adversary and even trying to do good where the Father within has already done good, and you are simply not seeing it because you're rushing through a human mind's activity. Now this pause can be the greatest pause of a person's life. In the pause, you are standing in front of this world and saying, stop. You're not fooling me. You sent a little representative here who's all hypnotized, but not me. Stop! I'm waiting for the Father to readjust this scene. That divine mind will come and do it. Something in you is born, and each little birth becomes a very kicking, alive life within, until there's a consciousness there which is no longer fooled. The world doesn't enter that consciousness. You don't look out through the window panes of a mortal mind, and you don't see the evils. They don't come nigh thy dwelling because you're in a new dwelling. You're dwelling in a touch of the Christ. Now this complete 6-day creation, all of it, is only visible through the eyes of the Christ. And that is the veil that has kept it from mortality. The complete, total, absolute, infinite creation of the Father is only visible through the eyes of the Christ. There is no other way. And so you must find the eyes of the Christ which are within you. Any other attempt to climb into heaven is just a Tower of Babel. It will falter, it will totter. You can never climb into heaven through any human means. This complete creation, absolute, is your entranceway through the Christ alone. I, the Christ, am the way to the 6-day creation of your Father. And it doesn't matter how many religions are born on this earth from now till doomsday, or what is taught, that simple truth can never be violated. Once you face it, only the Christ consciousness will do for you. There is no other in order to experience reality. Now this 6-day creation here, I have only glossed over. Somewhat of a surface analysis. But if you will accept that this that you are hearing about is really, in point of time, your future. In point of reality, it is your present. In point of your understanding, it's your future. This 6-day creation is alive and bristling now. In it lives those who have passed out of mortal mind through into this Christ realization, and lo and behold, they walk invisibly in the Spirit in the 6-day creation of Genesis. And it is they, living in various parts of infinity, who are ever reaching toward us as life to lift us out of the shell of ignorance. Don't be afraid of those impulses within. You don't know where they're coming from or what's behind them. But if they come to you, welcome them. Each little impulse is a significant invitation to you to yield, to become meek, to remember that when the truth of you was created in the divine image and likeness, male and female, you were blessed. You were Christed. And that blessing is infinite and eternal, can never change. The blessing of the Father upon your identity can never be diminished or altered or removed. For I am with thee always. And that blessing, you see, is your guarantee of who you are and who you can never change from. So instead of coming out from under that and living in a false life, accept the blessing, accept the identity, and relax in the omnipresent love and watch the divine mind whisper its eternal message of your identity. Your preparation, your purification, is the rejection of the concept of evil, of matter, of human life, of all belief in that which is unlike God itself. And as you stand in that awareness, that unbelief of that which is unlike God, you are accepting the blessing which was given in the first chapter of Genesis. And slowly that blessing will manifest as the Christ consciousness of your being. You have a job. And your job is to bear witness to the truth, which means to reject that which is not the truth. Matter is not the truth. Humanhood is not the truth. Evil is not the truth. Human good is not the truth. Reset the dials of your mind by accepting no human mind as your own. Then you will discover this human mind is the perfect channel for the divine, and they are welded into one, and heaven and earth are one. That which ever was and ever will be becomes your realization. Oh, I wish we could go deeper and longer, but there is a place in this where unless we're prepared to go together, we are actually walking in that which is the truth. And to walk in the truth, you cannot enter in a gross human body. Before the 6 days of creation was set down by Moses, and before there was 6 days of creation, even known to man of earth to set them down, there was a perfect creation, and it has never changed. And the world that later appeared as a hypnotized appearance in the mind of man has never really been here. The glory that we each share in the Father before the world was is the truth of our self in creation. And that truth is ever present, ever coming to you as an impulse, ever ruling from the invisible into the visible. Let us now become more conscious of these invisible impulses, for they are the hands of the Father reaching toward you through his angels. And as these realities grow on you, you will find that there is a beautiful and brave world beyond our world. Now that ought to do for the moment, but we have another date, another time. Now, I'm not sure we'll go further with this at the moment or not, but I can assure you that we will have another stimulating and I hope challenging discussion about some aspect of reality as revealed in the hidden scriptures of the world.